Y'all want to talk O-line? We're going to talk O-line. We're going to talk O-line for the entire show because Mason Cole, Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury have been the interior for 2 games now, and they've been 2 good games. I think some things have improved. Stick with me here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Shows on Twitter at Locked On Vikings, and this episode is brought to you by Stance Apparel. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Today on the show, it's going to be a guards day, and I guess a center too, but it's going to be an interior day. Let's talk about the big boys up front. Not necessarily the tackles, of course. Brian O'Neill, not much ambiguity, and the last couple games have been Oli Udoh at left tackle. Obviously, that's not going to stay the same way. Hopefully, we can get Christian Darrisaw back for Monday Night Football against Chicago, but we're in a weird no man's land where we're pretty far removed from the Thursday night game, but we're still pretty far away from the Monday night game, so let's take stock a little bit and talk about one of the chief issues of the Vikings for years and years and years. Guards and centers and the interior of the offensive line. And they kind of balled in the last couple of games. It's kind of wild. And I want to go through each of the 3 players that are a part of that. I want to go over Ezra Cleveland, Mason Cole, and Garrett Bradbury. I also have this in article form if you prefer. You can find that at zocoverage.com, but hear me out here. They've been good, and this should be the configuration. I might even consider taking it into next year. Like, they've been just no caveats good. And that rocks. It's weird to feel that way, but I kind of feel that way. So let's start. Let me start, I guess, with Mason Cole, who's been the source of quite a bit of drama, I guess, over the shuffling that the offensive line has done. Of course, we started out with Rashad Hill at left tackle. He gets replaced. Garrett Bradbury goes on COVID. Mason Cole takes over. Then Mason Cole moves over to right guard when Oli Udoh has to take over for Christian Darrisaw, which is in itself an interesting decision that it wasn't Rashad Hill again, but it was Udoh this time. I maintain what I said yesterday on Twitter Tuesday. I still agree with that. I still think that Oli Udoh is a better option. He hasn't been great over there at left tackle by any stretch of the imagination, but I think he's been better than Rashad Hill. Although, I don't know. We're kind of comparing a couple of poop sandwiches. But on the interior, Ezra Cleveland has been a fixture. You have Garrett Bradbury back at center and now Mason Cole at right guard. And this configuration has worked. So let's start with Mason Cole, who has been I think him at guard worked out exactly how we all thought it would. Nick Olson did a piece way back when the Vikings traded for him back in, I think it was March, when he came in as a much maligned center from the Arizona Cardinals. If you're a big PFF grades person, he graded out worse than Garrett Bradbury, and PFF probably hates Garrett Bradbury the most out of everybody, and they hated this guy more. So it was... definitely, he was not supposed to be the starting center, right? And he starts as the backup center, and there's never really a camp competition for that, right? But a lot of people said, well, wait, he should be a guard. And let me explain to you why. Think about the mechanics of center for a second, of playing the center position. You got to hike the ball. You have to snap the ball, and that takes a beat, right? It takes a beat to get your hand is on the ball. It has to snap it and then come up and then get involved in the actual pass protection or run block or get involved in your technique. But that hand is going to be late every single time because it has to snap the ball. There's nothing you can do about that. And defenses know that. And so nose tackles will often attack the dominant shoulder of the center because that hand's going to be late. So if you just line up right on that shoulder and go attack it, just fly off the ball and hit it, you're going to win the hand battle a lot, and that's going to make the centers block a little bit hard. And so something that they'll teach high school centers is to use their offhand to kind of throw out a preemptive punch. If you're going to come at my off shoulder, or if you're going to come at my dominant shoulder, I'm going to use my other hand to hit you and at least try to buy myself some time so that my dominant hand can get back into the fold. And this is all, light speed stuff. This is split second. As quickly as your hand can get in, it can get in, but you still need to buy yourself that beat, that split second. Mason Cole wasn't doing that. And that led to, if you remember when he started at center against the Packers, do you remember the first play where Kenny Clark bowled him over and got a big giant TFL? That I think was the cause of that Kenny Clark attacked that shoulder and was able to do so unimpeded because Mason Cole just didn't quite have that technique. And he is just generally like late to build his house, to get his stances up. His hands are late, and in the interior, when it's an Oklahoma drill, I mean, it's just two big dudes coming at each other and who's going to win, right? It's a physical thing. Whoever gets their hands on you first, their hands on the other guy first, is going to win the rep, like a lot of the time. Whoever strikes first will win. And so as a center, you have to be attack, you have to be aggressive. Pass pro isn't passive, as it were, and run blocks are even less passive. At guard, for Mason Cole, and this was kind of the thesis, and I think we've seen it bear out, at guard, Mason Cole doesn't have to worry about snapping the ball. So he can he can start the rep with his hands in the air if he's in a 2-point stance. And he can just have them right next to you. It's a skill he does not have to do. It's a skill he had not developed, and it's a skill he does not have to develop if he stays at guard. So why not just keep him at guard? He can be an emergency center, a backup center, or whatever. If Garrett Bradbury gets hurt, you can slide him back over. Sure, whatever, right? That's never going to be an ideal plan. But at right guard, if you compare Mason Cole as an option to Oli Udoh, like once Darisaw gets back to you, move Oli Udoh back. And I don't think anybody wants to, right? But if you compare those two things, and let's check our work on that, Oli Udoh has some tackle to guard problems, some similar stuff that Ezra Cleveland has. So we'll talk about that when we get to him. But you can get rid of those problems. Mason Cole knows the interior. He's played plenty of guard before. He played it plenty in Arizona. And those were his best games anyways, so there was evidence of this. And the Vikings have now figured it out. I guess better late than never. Obviously, you kind of wish they had gotten there before instead of having all these really terrible things happening with Oli Udoh at right guard. But considering the camp that Oli Udoh had, I'm pretty sympathetic to them like letting that kind of run its course. Either way, they've found, I think, a home for Mason Cole, to the point where, I think I said this on yesterday's show as well, I'd extend him, man. I'd give him more than a year, honestly. I would not just do 1-year deals till the cows come home. I'd give him 2-3 year deal and let him be the right guard for a while. I think he's earned that in the 2 games, if he keeps it up, right? He could come out next week, have a total disaster game, and then one of his 3 games at right guard would be a disaster. And that would change the texture of this a lot. But just watching the games against the Lions and Steelers here, it seems like he's just good at the position, like good enough to be a starter at the position. And I think you got to keep that guy in house no matter who takes over, right? Because it's not like he's a crazy scheme specific guy or anything either. I think he's just a guy you should probably keep in the house. I think they found one here. Before we move on to the other guys, a quick note, the COVID thing is still kind of ripping through the Vikings. They're going on another wave. The whole NFL is suffering from this. There's like 75 players going on the COVID IR list. Among those for the Vikings on Tuesday were Dede Westbrook, and then a couple of guys on the practice squad, Tristan Jackson and AJ Rose, as well as Daniil Hunter, who it doesn't make much of a material difference, but just so you know, the active player among all those guys, Dede Westbrook, is vaccinated. So if his case is asymptomatic, he's got a decent chance to play on Monday night. So we'll have to monitor that. And the same thing, I think, goes for Dan Chisena. And but not for Alexander Madison, who went out on Monday. He has to miss the 10 days, so he'll have to miss Monday Night Football. So that's something that we all have to keep an eye on. Everybody is dealing with this. It's hitting the Vikings just as hard as it's hitting everybody else. It's just winter holiday season. It's just kind of be the wave, I think, and how this sort of thing goes. So we're gonna get to Garrett Bradbury. We're gonna get to Ezra Cleveland, but. Look, Super Bowl 56 at SoFi is less than 100 days away, and On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Select your exact seats and choose from elite experiences, featuring an exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star LA hotels, and food by the great Wolfgang Puck. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information, or search Super Bowl On Location. That's onlocationexp.com/SB56, or search Super Bowl On Location. Let me also talk to you about apparel. In 2009, Stance was founded, and they wanted to revolutionize the way we think about like socks and underwear and activewear. They have a sharp focus on comfort and quality and creativity. They have all sorts of fun designs from all your favorite pop culture brands like Star Wars or whatever. And that's like important, right? That's part of it. Like what you wear is how you express yourself. And it's important not to overlook that even with something like your socks. Put fun designs on them. They look good. They feel good. They're like form fitting to your feet. They're made out of a comfortable fabric. They're socks made with some common sense instead of just trying to huck out as many as they can as cheaply as possible. Stance believes in a certain degree of quality. The perfect fit matters more than fitting in. And those who feel good, do good. So, see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off of your first purchase. Use promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Thank you once again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Let's do Ezra Cleveland now. So Ezra Cleveland is a tackle playing guard. That's the key here. And I'm going to teach you a couple things that about guard play that like awkwardly translate from being a tackle. And here's the thing that I'll say. All this stuff I'm about to describe, he has gotten visibly better at in the last couple of games. I don't think that's like a chemistry thing with being next to Oli Udoh instead of Garrett or anything like that. I think he's just getting more comfortable at the position. He's now in his second year, and it's starting to be a little bit more routine for him. He seems to be like his long-term future is as a guard. He's not going to be a tackle. They just took one in the first round, and then they extended the other one. He does not have a future at tackle in the Vikings organization. So he is going to stay a guard. And I think he's sort of settling into that and starting to get those habits down. But to get into detail about that, I have to explain what the problem was. And I've explained some of this before, but basically tackle's a timing game, especially in pass pro. In run blocking, there's enough overlap between tackle and guard. And honestly, in run blocking, Ezra Cleveland he was very strong in run blocking kind of all year, especially in the second level, pulling out, kicking out and stuff like that. He's been great at that. But in pass blocking at tackle, it's a timing game. Think about an edge rusher coming. If you throw your hands up early, he's going to swat them out of the way. You're going to be dead to rights. And if you throw him up late, he just comes right through you. So you have to time your punch. You have to time your hands to engage at the proper time. And that's a skill that requires some timing and some feel, and it's like one of the challenges of playing tackle. At guard, there is no such timing game. And so when you get tackles that move to guard, their hands can be late a lot. And we've seen this with a lot of tackles that have moved inside to guard. Mike Remmers in particular comes to mind, probably Charlie Johnson, though I wasn't watching football as closely back in 2014. But he was another tackle that moved into guard. But that's why I'm like always kind of not a fan of moving tackles into guard necessarily. Oli Udoh's problem took a different texture, and we're not talking about him today. But with Cleveland, it was kind of the same thing. His hands would be late. He would wait for players to come, and defensive tackles to come. But defensive tackles aren't sitting there and setting up moves. And if they are, you probably gave them too much room because of a problem that I'll talk about in a second. But for the most part, the toughest thing you're going to have to do is stop a 330-pound guy that's flying off the ball and coming straight into you. To do that, you have to be aggressive. You can't be backing up into that and giving up some momentum already at the point of engagement. You got to meet that guy. And with somebody like Ezra Cleveland, who's very strong, he's got sand in his pants, crazy athletic, you should be able to meet that guy. And he's being a little bit more aggressive on that. He's been using that preemptive arm, not unlike center technique. It's not because you're snapping. It's just because, he's got a long arm and he can use it. But he can kind of use that arm to thwart somebody's initial punch or somebody's initial rush. And if he's been coming out with it a little bit faster, when he's waiting for guys to come, his pass pro is too passive and guys can sort of set him up or just come aggressively into him and then his hands are late and he's lost the rep. The other thing is he was setting a little too deep, and it's another tackle thing. If you think about when you're the tackle, in most protections, you have to set at a certain depth that is relative to the quarterback's drop back depth. If the quarterback drops back 8 yards, you have to kind of defend all 8 of those yards. And if you can get the edge rusher to go 9 yards upfield and go around and behind the quarterback, every quarterback in the world will take that, right? That's a win for you if you can just redirect that guy. So you have all 8 yards to defend, and that means you have to drop with some depth to defend all 8 of those yards. Well, at guard, you're not defending anybody up and around the edge. All you have to defend is the area between the center and the tackle. And so when you drop with a lot of that depth, well, then that area suddenly goes from a 2-dimensional space to a 3-dimensional space. And you give a big guy that much room to work, and then suddenly they are setting up swim moves and spins and all sorts of random stuff on you. And it kind of turns into the spacing and dynamicism of an edge rushing challenge mixed with the beef of a defensive tackle, and you get the worst of both worlds when you set too deep like that. And Cleveland had been doing that. Well, he's flattened things out a lot. In the Steelers game in particular, he flattened out a lot, and it really helped him because it made those engagements come faster. That meant that he gets rewarded for making his hands faster, and everything just starts to get a little more comfortable. He is starting to play more like a guard instead of playing like a tackle out of position. And if that can continue, that would be awesome. Again, he's on a hot streak right now, and hot streaks can cool off. So all this stuff has to continue. But I really like what I've seen from him in the last few games, even in, I think it was the Packers game, where he had a particularly poor performance. Even taking that one into account, the last kind of string of games have been really, really positive on the whole for Ezra Cleveland, kind of more than the other two guys. Cleveland's the one that has like really won me over the most. And I started really, really low on him earlier in the year. I want to talk about Bradbury at center and some of the things that have changed about his play, or at least some of the things that I think are more noticeable now, especially since we're watching centers so very close these days. But first, let me talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It's the holiday season, makes for a perfect stocking stuffer because it is like a candy bar. It is covered in 100% chocolate, absolutely delicious. They even have like a marshmallow kind. It's called Built Bar Puff, and it's like marshmallowy on the inside. It's like a chocolate covered like marshmallow treat. It's delicious. It's low sugar, low calorie, high protein, high fiber, low fat, low carb, and it tastes like a candy bar. Satisfy the cravings. Have your cheat day without actually having to cheat on a day. And at Built.com, you can enter promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you get 15% off of your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, all one word, to get 15% off of your next order at Built.com. Okay, the pièce de résistance, my Garrett Bradbury takes, always going to be a fun time. So for those who haven't been following the show, I've sort of stuck by Garrett Bradbury over the struggles that he's had. But let me be perfectly fair with him, right? Let me take all the context away, all the priors, all the everything, right? And just be perfectly frank about Garrett Bradbury's play. He had two really, really bad games before he went on COVID IR. Against Dallas and then before the bye against Carolina were two pretty rough outings for him. Before that, I thought he was fine. And coming back after that, I think he's had two really, really good games at center. That's the season I think that he has had. Take it for whatever that is. But in the last couple of games, there's a couple things that I notice are different, and they're really, really subtle. So the problem of Garrett Bradbury, a lot of people say he's just not that strong. And it's weird because he has enough of an understanding of leverage where that can not matter. He can make that not matter. But he doesn't do that often enough. And part of it is because his pass sets are very wide. He has very, very flexible legs, and that gets him a lot of great stuff when he's reach blocking and doing run block stuff. And in pass block, it gets him squatting like a sumo wrestler, and that's not much of a base for accepting contact. And that's a problem he has. He just sets really wide. Now, when he sets that wide, it can kind of help him be just a wider presence, so it's more difficult for nose tackles to get around him, and you don't get stuff like his rookie debut against Grady Jarrett, which I'm sure is seared into all of our brains. But the problem with that, and you can look at, in the article that I wrote, you can look at a rep against the Panthers that went kind of viral that I think shows this really well, where his foot will fly so far outside of his frame that it's no longer a base to actually drive off of. So if he gets faked at all, and this is just a head fake from, I believe, a blitzing linebacker that isn't like, it's nothing special. It's just a head fake, but it gets him to swing his leg way out to the moon. And then when the rusher turns the other way, Bradbury can't drive on that leg because it's so far, he's doing the stanky leg, and there's no base off of that. He can't put any weight on that. His leg is too far out of his frame. Against the Steelers, something similar happened where he got head faked by Alan McNeil this time. So not quite as agile, right? It's a true nose tackle, but he got beat outside of his frame. The guy crossed his face, and that's losing for a center. So his leg still swung way outside to the wrong way. But what he did is he actually dragged his toe, brought it back into his frame, drove on it, and recovered and won the rep. And look, for O-line, recovery is everything. Because as an offensive lineman, I don't care if you're Marshall Yonda or Joe Thomas or Quentin Nelson, you are going to get beat off the snap sometimes. There are some moves that defensive linemen do that it would be irresponsible to set yourself up to beat them. And you're going to be in a desperate, I need to make a comeback situation. It happens multiple times a game to every single lineman, always, bar none, no matter what. And how you recover in those situations sort of separates the men from the boys. Going back to Mason Cole for a second, Mason Cole has recovery. That dude has grit, and he is never out of a rep. And I think that's something that really endears me to him, probably more than it should. I probably overweight that when it comes to evaluating O-line, but it just wins me over when he does that. And he does that a good amount. He did it at center too. And so seeing Bradbury do that also kind of won me over. When you put all these guys together and you have this sort of more aggressive, faster playing line, and Bradbury's doing it faster as well. They've flattened out their protections a lot against the Steelers, which is interesting because the Steelers presented a lot of the same fronts that Carolina did. And if you watch the Carolina protections, they would make a pocket and they would kind of wrap back like you would curl back like a true pass protection pocket, but they would back up off of it. And that gives Kirk Cousins less room. Against the Steelers, very similar fronts, but I guess they were expecting different pass rushes, or maybe it's just an adjustment they've made because it seems to help everybody on their team. They've flattened it out a little bit more. It's not like a true pocket backing up. They are meeting players at the line of scrimmage, and that gives Kirk Cousins a little bit more time. Even if you lose the rep, Cousins is just further away, right? And it's the same dropbacks and stuff. Shotgun, 3-step drop, 8-yard drop back. But an 8-yard drop back is a better move when the line is at the line of scrimmage versus when they are setting up 2 yards back. I'd rather have 8 yards of space than 6 yards of space. So all of that is really helping all of these guys, and they're playing really well on top of all of that. And what you can then kind of see is when Bradbury does understand leverage, and this goes for Cole and Cleveland as well, you can see him start to drive guys off the ball, play with some confidence, and really just physically dominant. You can really see that mental aspect of they're feeling it, and they are just dominating a guy, and they're just firing off the ball and attacking, and kicking a bunch of ass. It's really fun to see the interior offensive line kick ass, especially on combo blocks where, that starts as a double team and then one person comes off the double team and climbs to the second level. Usually that means the other guy has to reach block. It's sort of Garrett Bradbury's claim to fame. So obviously we love being able to do that again. Couldn't really do as much of that with Mason Cole. At least by my eye, I didn't hurt it or anything like that. But it seemed like they were doing a lot less of that, and it seemed like that was hurting the run game, so that's back. And then, of course, Dalvin puts up 200 yards on a bum shoulder. That rocks. All of this is really working out well. I like this configuration. That's the point of this episode. I like this configuration. Ezra Cleveland at left guard might be working out. He might be playing to a level where we actually say, hey, this could be a future here. Garrett Bradbury, maybe he's too poisoned, maybe he's too tainted. It probably takes more than a couple games to win everybody over, including the Vikings, who benched him. And then Mason Cole probably takes more than 2 games as well, because you've got a small sample problem here. But if these guys can play this way throughout the rest of the season, make the playoffs or no, obviously that's going to change a lot of stuff. But if they're coming off this 7-game stretch of super, super hot play, and that I admit that I'm adding 4 games to that. So if the next 4 games are there, it'll probably be driven by those 4 games, right? But if they can do that, if they can keep this level of play up, rebuild or not, you got an interior offensive line, and starting things off in the trade. You have a whole offensive line, honestly, because you have Darrisaw and O'Neal. Those guys are fixtures. If you just have an offensive line here, then that's a big bugaboo for the Vikings. That's suddenly, with Kirk Cousins or with somebody else, is a really, really great launching point. So tomorrow is Crossover Thursday. We're going to talk to Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, and then we'll preview the Bears a little bit on Friday. We'll preview the Bears a little bit more on Monday morning before the Monday night game. So make sure you listen to that. We'll talk. I don't know. We'll figure out something to do there, and then of course on Tuesday we'll wrap the game, and probably no Twitter Tuesday next week, but we'll get it all there, and we'll get your bold predictions. Don't you forget those. So. Start thinking about those. We'll get all that stuff wrapped up tomorrow for the Friday show, but tomorrow's Crossover Thursday. Check that out. Check out Locked On Bets with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. They'll get your gambles straight. I will see you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.